Buckeye, born and bred, now HOFer, even after I'm dead. Thank you.
All right, hey sports fans, welcome to this edition of Football Talk. This is, of course, an Inside Sports production. I'm your host, Charles E. Smith, Jr. We'll be breaking it down now. The NFL has reached Week 7. Everything is humming along. Unfortunately, the injuries are still piling up, but a couple of NFL icons passed away. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about a suspension that came up. Lots of other things. So without any further ado, let me go and introduce my partner here. None other than Chris Lardieri. You follow him on Twitter, if you're lucky, at Chris L Sports. Also, read him online, chrislsports.blogspot.com. Without any further ado, Mr. Lardieri, what's happening?
Charles, as always, thank you for the great introduction. Happy to be here, and I can't believe we're almost at the halfway point of the NFL season.
Yeah, exactly. And so as we start off everything with, what's the latest in the writings and the goings-on of Mr. Lardieri?
Well, just very shocked that one of the most awful Monday night games actually resulted in a Giants victory. I saw where ESPN got higher ratings for this game than they did this time last year, 9.5. Interesting to see if that'll even outrate the first game of the World Series. That just goes to tell you, as bad as any game can be or the product can be, the NFL is still king in this country. And as you are all pretty aware, I'm an unabashed Giants fan, and that game pretty much left me drowsy. Even it being their first victory of the year, that was tough to watch. And then going to be doing some pieces for Sports Comebacks, bring out a little more of the sarcasm with the Jaguars and the 49ers playing in London this week. I think now is as good a time as any to examine why the heck the NFL keeps subjecting us to games in London, and why the people of England probably really have no interest in it.
Yeah, well, looking at some of these Thursday night matchups they put on, maybe those should be shown exclusively in England, since they don't really understand the game. But I don't understand. They try to get the best matchups for Sunday night and Monday night. In fact, Sunday night they can even flex out of if they can get a better matchup that's coming up. But explain to me the theory behind these Thursday night games that they have. Like tomorrow is Carolina and Tampa Bay. I believe it's Carolina and Tampa Bay, correct?
Yeah, it sure is. It's that big NFC South divisional matchup that we don't talk about. It's pretty simple. I mean, like most things in life, it has to do with money. And NBC paid an arm and a leg to get the Sunday night rights to Monday Night Football, and to have that flex option, which doesn't keep their partners at Fox and CBS too happy, does it? And the only reason for these Thursday night games, the NFL Network, which is owned by the league, was not on enough cable outlets. They figured, hey, let's put a Thursday night game, even if it's as bad as it is, as we saw with the Giants and Vikings, an NFL game, even if it's Caribbean on a Thursday night, is going to get ratings. So if it gets eyeballs to it and it's some sort of a loss leader, you hear about it. More cable companies, after they started these Thursday night games, started picking up the network. So that can be the only reason. And then there are now reports out that they're going to bail on this proposed doubleheader idea on Thursday nights that they proposed, which we talked about last week, was just a horrible idea. And what they might end up doing is bid out those Thursday night games to another network to make some money off it. And if a network's paying top dollar for Thursday night, I don't think they're going to want Cleveland, Buffalo, or Carolina, Tampa Bay. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I've always been kind of perplexed just for the standalone game of one day, why they don't have bigger matchups scheduled. The Thursday night games to me were always kind of I was always a little bit puzzled by that.
Yeah, and if you ask me, I'm a traditionalist. Call me an old fart, whatever. I just like the Thanksgiving Thursday games. I think Jay Cutler made a great point. Every team has to play at least one Thursday night game a year. You've only got a couple days to recuperate from the previous week and prepare for the next week. So the playbook's dumbed down, and you're just not going to get the same quality football. The guys aren't prepared, and they're tired.
Yep, that's true. So, let's go ahead and get into everything for this week. So, of course, as we all know, and all you old school football fans, of course, two NFL icons. We remember back in the 70s, and I know, Lardieri, you must be feeling kind of nostalgic about this, but on Friday, Bum Phillips passed away. He coached the great Houston Oilers teams of the 70s that couldn't quite get there to the Super Bowl. And then on Monday, Bud Adams, who employed him back then and fired him back then, he passed away on Monday, October 21st. In fact, interestingly enough, Bum Phillips dies on Friday. Bud Adams releases a statement regarding his death, the death of Phillips, on Saturday, and then on Monday, Bud Adams is gone. So maybe something that was kind of perfectly orchestrated by the folks in football heaven.
Yeah, pretty interesting timing and karmic. A lot of people don't remember Bum Phillips. I know you and I do, especially you being a Steeler fan with those Love You Blue Houston Oilers, Earl Campbell, Dan Pastorini, Billy White Shoes Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they really had some great teams down there. And the problem is every year in the playoffs, especially a couple of years in a row in the late 70s, they'd run into the steel curtain in the AFC Championship game, and that was it. Kind of like a lot of the great Raiders teams and Dolphins teams of the 70s. You run into Pittsburgh, you're not going anywhere. But he really had a different way about him, and his son Wade Phillips, a defensive coordinator with the Texans, so apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But he was a character. He always wore a cowboy hat, but not in the Astrodome because his grandma taught him you don't wear a hat indoors.
Yeah.
So he was a colorful character, and then ended up with the lowly New Orleans Saints at the end of his career. So let's give him credit for that, for even taking that job.
Yeah, and I remember him saying, Bum Phillips, all of his quotes, he said, "There's only two kinds of coaches, them that's fired and them that's going to be fired." But I think that Bud Adams kind of was he was an extension of Bud Adams when he was down there on the field, even though Bud Adams wound up firing. But I really think that there was a connection between those two guys. Both of them, ironically, 90 years old. Both of them lived to be 90 years old, and then they die 3 days apart. And Bud Adams, too, you got to give him credit, being one of the innovators, even though he did ultimately kind of alienate the fans there in Houston. But I think you look at what he did, co-founder of the AFL, and he's kind of like the way that Charlie Finley was with the Oakland A's, and it was more about building the sport and the business side. The local fans were kind of secondary to Adams, but Adams really wanted to win. He wanted to win championships, though he never got one. But it's kind of one of those, he made some tough business decisions.
Yeah, definitely, and he and Lamar Hunt in Kansas City were instrumental in that. People don't remember, but the AFL was just this rogue league, kind of like what the USFL was perceived to be in the 1980s.
Uh-huh.
And because they became so successful and had a lot of high-powered offenses, and Joe Namath playing in New York, basically, if it wasn't for that, there's no merger, there's no Super Bowl. Who knows what would have happened? So yeah, definitely ahead of his time in terms of a businessman and an innovator. And like you said, I know probably not have a lot of fans in Houston, but
Right.
definitely a smart guy.
Yep, and just one more capper. That was with like I mentioned, Charlie Finley. Charlie Finley was one of the ones who, the reason why we have World Series games on at night is because of Charlie Finley. He was the one who said, not everyone should be able to get to enjoy the games, not those who just can watch or listen during the day, but put it on at night when everybody's home so they can all enjoy the World Series games. So, innovator there as well.
Yeah, too bad he didn't understand that teams like the Red Sox and Yankees would take so many pitches that the games would routinely go on till 12:30 in the morning.
Yes, well, hey, that's kind of the way it goes. But hey, us on the West Coast, we love it.
Yeah, it's great. Like they say, if you're a West Coast fan, you get to see all the World Series and Monday night games and still have your night left.
Yep, there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and get on to this week's football. Your Giants, finally, they win a game. They beat the Vikings 23-7 on Monday night. Josh Freeman starts for the Vikings. He's horrible, and he has a concussion now, and now they're going back to Christian Ponder. So I wonder how much sleep Leslie Frazier is getting these days.
Yeah, probably not much. I mean, they were even alluding to it on the broadcast, Mike Tirico and John Gruden, about how his days are numbered and his contract's up. So, yeah, and I didn't really quite understand. I know they signed Josh Freeman. They want him to be the quarterback, but you could just tell the guy really didn't have a grasp of the playbook. He was off a little rusty since he's been sitting in Greg Schiano's doghouse. I mean, why not make a change, especially if you're trying to win the game? He's missing wide-open receivers, and believe me, the Vikings lost that game as much as the Giants won it. The Vikings are driving after a fumble, and he throws the ball right back to Antrell Roll, killing that drive. I mean, at that point, I pull him. As bad as Ponder or Matt Castle may be, at least they got the playbook down pat.
Yeah, that's true. And, you got to wonder with Leslie Frazier, what is he really given to work with, though? When you look at the quarterback situation, talk about Castle, Christian Ponder, and Josh Freeman coming in. They brought in Josh Freeman because really they had no one else. That's a desperation move. But I always look at when you're going to fire a coach, though, what tools did you really give him to succeed? Did you give him what he needed?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you go look across the field at Tom Coughlin. I mean, that Giants team's been decimated by injuries and has no depth. They've got a bunch of inexperienced players, and looking at Peyton Hillis off the street to be a running back, and Brandon Jacobs before that. And similarly with the Vikings, Percy Harvin, as injured as he was a legitimate deep threat for the Vikings. They trade him to Seattle. Who do they replace him with? Greg Jennings, who may or may not be over the hill, but regardless, he's a shadow of himself. And what you have now is a bunch of teams just keying on Adrian Peterson like the Giants did and saying, try and throw on us. You can't. And, they got a pretty solid defense back there, but when you're not scoring, other than on a punt return, you're not really going to win. I mean, a lot of times the coach takes the blame, but GMs ultimately put the players out on the field.
Yeah, that's true. And, switching to another game, that was the big matchup, was the Sunday night game. Of course, Peyton Manning going back home to Indy, facing the Colts and Andrew Luck. Jim Irsay in the middle of everything with some comments he made about Manning last week. But Andrew Luck and the Colts, they pull off that big win over the Broncos on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, that was a very impressive win. I know the Colts got up and the Broncos tried to make a late run of it, but they didn't give up. They didn't buckle under pressure, and Luck looks like a cool, calm, and poised veteran quarterback, much like Peyton Manning. And, looking back on my picks from last week, which were atrocious, I'm glad I didn't pick it because I thought the Broncos were going to pull it out. So even more impressive was the Colts defense. I think they're really coming around, and they had a good game plan for Peyton and shut down that high-powered offense.
Yeah, they did. And, of course, the Broncos, a few problems there on defense with Champ Bailey, for one, who's, re-injured that foot. And Bailey, it's just painful, no pun intended, to just see that some of these guys hang around for way longer than they should. It's like Champ Bailey, yes, you're a Hall of Famer. Yes, you and Steve Atwater are probably the best defensive backs that ever played for the Broncos. But, Father Time is telling you something here.
Yeah, he's really looking his age, and it's kind of a shame for a guy who was so dominant now and still trying to get back. He's just not there. And similarly, someone else who came back, Von Miller from suspension, even though he's been practicing with the team, he sure as heck didn't look like he was in game shape coming off his suspension, so not much of a help there.
Yeah, and then also, it's interesting just how quickly we forget certain things, and that is the Redskins beat the Bears. RG3, though, now you can tell he's getting healthy again. You just kind of forgotten just how dynamic that guy was. And the Redskins get the win, but Jay Cutler and Lance Briggs get injured for the Bears, and possibly we're seeing maybe the end of the Bears season, really, and the Jay Cutler days in Chicago may be numbered, because Cutler's out for at least 4 weeks with that groin, probably more like 6 weeks, I would think.
Yeah, and that was not good news for the Bears because they become a completely different team now without Jay Cutler. Say what you will about him, but he's a quality starting NFL quarterback, and much like the Rams with Sam Bradford, who's done for the year.
Right.
When your quarterback goes down, all sense of optimism seems to go out the window. So this will be a much different Bears team, and I don't think the defense can carry it.
Yeah, and one thing about Cutler, you look at him, it's almost like a lot of his personality just falls over into it becomes a little bit of karma. But last year you got Joe Flacco deciding to play out the last year of the contract and then negotiate. He winds up winning the Super Bowl, gets the big deal. Cutler does the same thing this year, and what happens to him? They get off to a decent start, and now he's injured. So it's going to be a tumultuous offseason for Mr. Cutler in Chicago.
Yeah, definitely. And you bring up a good point. Flacco really rolled the dice, and boy, did he hit the jackpot. But looking at all the injuries this year, we may now see a negotiating ploy where guys, they try and renegotiate before they go into that proverbial lame duck season. Because what if you do get hurt? You're leaving millions of dollars on the table, and with the way guys are dropping like flies, you can't blame them.
Yeah, that's true. That is definitely true. Now, what about the obscure rule, the pushing rule, there that gave the Jets another chance to beat the Patriots on the last play of the game with that field goal? That was one of the stranger occurrences I've seen in the league so far.
Yeah, I didn't even know about this new rule because, there are some of these arcane little rules that change from year to year. But looking at the replay, that ref was right in front of it and flagged it right away. And I know Mr. Belichick wasn't too happy after the game and made some comment about the second level, which he retracted. I mean, when I hear second level, I think of my kids and playing Angry Birds Star Wars or whatever, but I didn't realize there was one in the NFL. But, yeah, I mean, that's the rule. And much like the infamous Tuck rule, the ref called it right. He read the letter of the law, and he called it correctly, and he gave Nick Folk a second chance, and big upset in the Meadowlands.
Yeah, and then, one of the other things was on the Sunday night game, you saw that the great tackle by the kicker there that saved a touchdown. But one thing was, when you look at that play, it was actually helmet-to-helmet contact on that, although, there's no flag. He doesn't get fined or anything. And I was thinking, and I know it's hard to put anything on a kicker because they get so few chances to make a big play. But you think, if Dominican Sue or Brandon Merriweather or James Harrison, if they hit someone like that, that's $40,000 out of their pocket easy.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, we want our kickers to try and play defense when we need to. And he did. But like you said, if you're going to apply the letter of the law to those notorious offenders, you've got to apply it to everyone. So the rule is the rule.
Yep. And, speaking of Brandon Merriweather, I am glad that he finally did get suspended for the, another helmet-to-helmet hit that he made during that game because, Merriweather, he's one of those guys, and hey, you're looking at someone who defended James Harrison a lot because I thought that the league was kind of after James Harrison, trying to make him the poster boy for illegal hits back in the day. But Brandon Merriweather, I've seen him lead just straight with his head. I mean, we're talking hands down at his sides and launching his helmet into the ear hole of an opposing player. I've seen that too much from him. He did that when he was with the Patriots. He does that with the Redskins. And finally, they wanted to spend him 2 games, but then they backed it down to only 1 game. But this has been a long time coming for Merriweather.
Yeah, he's reminding me of the former late great safety for the old Eagles teams in the 80s, Andre Dirty Waters. Oh. I mean, he's really making a name for himself now. And I think the league's onto him, and if he keeps it up, he's going to be the new Ndamukong Suh poster boy of fines.
Yeah, and Andre Waters, he was the one who targeted the knees all the time. That was what happened with Waters, which was just that's ending a career.
Yep, and ironically enough, he had this post-career concussion syndrome and ended up taking his own life, I believe. So, yeah, I don't think it's good for Merriweather's health in the long run either. He should probably realize that at the very least.
Right, and then, what about the Steelers? Let's talk a little bit about Steel Town. Won 2 games in a row now, and, maybe getting on a roll. If they can pull out a win this week, it's amazingly enough, they are getting onto the fringes of the playoff picture.
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, if they're in the NFC East, they're a runaway division favorite. But even still, the AFC North is not a juggernaut by any means. You've got the Ravens up and down from week to week. The Browns, not a contender. And, as impressed as I was with the Bengals win over the Lions, we all know how shaky and streaky they can be. So if the Steelers can get a win against the Bengals and start stringing a few more down the road, and they're back in the thick of things. And they played old style, like we said. We thought it'd be a close game. Comes down to a field goal with the clock expiring. Typical Steelers-Ravens game. And I think Mike Tomlin, while the offense isn't really rolling over everyone, they're playing solid defense and winning that old style of football that they like to play.
And they did, by the way, release Isaac Redman, the running back, earlier this week. So who knows? Maybe we'll see him in the backfield for your Giants at some point here.
Yeah, you know what? I like Peyton Hill. He's got a lot of heart, but I don't know. You're a good point. Isaac Redman might be an improvement, which isn't saying much.
Yep. All right. So you know what? It's just about time to get into the the picks of the week here. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about the Houston Texans. How about Case Keenum getting his first start in the hostile environment that is Kansas City? But they wind up only losing the game by 1 point. So when I look at this, you look at Keenum, who basically had no real NFL experience before this, but Matt Schaub, really he's gone belly up. TJ Yates has proven already that he is not the answer in any way, shape, or form at quarterback for any team in the league, not even Jacksonville. So is it time for the Case Keenum era to begin in Houston?
Yeah, I think it might be because at this point, is Gary Kubiak even going to keep his job regardless? You never know. He had a nice touchdown pass. He didn't play half bad against a very tough Kansas City Chiefs defense, and they're in that game throughout. So why not give him a chance? I mean, you look at the Eagles. That's the same thing they did with Nick Foles, and before he injured his head, like we said, everyone in Philly thought Nick Foles should be the starter. Get a year under your belt, see how you develop, see if he is the answer. If you've got to go out and draft a quarterback next year, why not? Because, let's face it looks like the Colts are going to run away with this division. You don't really want to throw the towel in, but at the same time, what if he does end up being a good player? Now, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Kurt Warner, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah. Most definitely. And when we look at the starting quarterbacks this week, Josh Freeman out with a concussion, Sam Bradford out with a knee, and we talk about Nick Foles getting a concussion also. So really a tough week. Also, just in general, Douglas Martin, running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he's also done probably for the season. Reggie Wayne out with a torn ACL. Lance Briggs out 6 weeks for the Chicago Bears. We talked about Champ Bailey. But on the plus side, Percy Harvin is almost back. I don't think he'll play this Monday in Arizona, but I think that quite possibly in 2 weeks we'll see Percy Harvin back out there for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, and that's going to make a dangerous team even more dangerous. Russell Wilson's going to have a legitimate deep threat on the other side there. So good for him because at the outset, beginning of the season, a lot of people thought his season would be done. So he's really progressed well in his rehab.
Yeah. All righty, so let's go ahead and get into one of our favorite segments, although I don't know why, but the picks of the week.
I'll say.
Well, Chris, 1-5 last week, but you have bragging rights. I went 0-6. The game that we differed on was Dallas and Philadelphia. I took Philadelphia, obviously. I came up snake eyes on that. But, it's been rough. I'm 15-27 on the year. You're still batting 500, though. You're 21-21, man. You're doing okay.
Yeah, I guess a broken clock is indeed right twice a day, and with these stats, we could win the NFC East, and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that, I'm not one to make excuses, but I think that you look at the injuries, the chemistry of teams, you just kind of don't really know what we're dealing with week to week. But, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and get right into it here. First game we're going to pick. This is a tough one for you, I know. I'll go ahead and pick first, and then we'll have you chime in. The New York Giants at Philadelphia taking on the Eagles. So you got the Giants, who just got their first win, versus the Eagles, who will be starting either a concussed Nick Foles, a hobbled Michael Vick, or an inexperienced Matt Barkley against the Giants, who just finally got their first win of the season. Now, I think the Giants, as bad as they are, as bad as they've been, they'll get some momentum here. And then one of the stats they put up on Monday night was that Eli has always put together a win streak over the last, I think it was 5 years. He's always put together a win streak of at least 4 games. I think that may be coming right now. So I'm going to go with the Giants to take down Philadelphia this week.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with you, and I'm basing this solely on the fact that either Matt Barkley, who I would have zero confidence in if I was an Eagles fan, or a hobbled Foles or Vic will be starting. If Vic's 100% or Foles 100%, is a no-brainer. I picked the Eagles. But, Giants got some momentum, handed a victory essentially. Eli tends to play well against the Eagles, so it's not like they've got this vaunted defense that would really scare anyone. They kind of held the Cowboys in check, but ultimately you saw what happened on the flip side of the ball with Foles not in there. They're not scoring on a Dallas defense that Denver lit up. So,
yeah.
You know what? Eli likes to get streaky. I think it could be an ugly game. The sting of the previous loss in the Meadowlands earlier this month will be with them. And I think the Giants are going to try and make a futile attempt to win the NFC East and win again this week.
All righty. So going to go with the freaky, streaky Eli over the Eagles. So we all agree on that one.
Yes.
Okay, next game, the Dallas Cowboys in Detroit to take on the Lions. The Cowboys, of course, coming off the win over the Eagles last week. Detroit, the heartbreaking loss against Cincinnati. Dallas still without DeMarcus Ware, and DeMarco Murray is, a little bit shaky. How do you think they'll do against Matt Stafford, Megatron, and also that stout defensive line of the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, I think the Lions really let that one get away. It's tough to defend A.J. Green, but to let the Bengals come back and win like that in your own house had to be somewhat demoralizing. However, that said, I think they bounced back. The Cowboys have been very up and down this year. That I think they're going to miss Ware on the defensive side of the ball. If they can get the pass rush going against Romo, maybe knock him around, force him to throw the ball, maybe create a turnover or two, or his notorious overthrowing of guys. And with the way the Lions offense have been playing, with Megatron back on track, making fantastic catches, I think the Lions can rebound this week and pull out the victory.
Yeah, and I think Megatron with as good a triple coverage catch as I think I've seen ever since the Sea of Hands playoff game between the Raiders and the Dolphins back in 1974. But you know what? I'm just kind of rambling on here.
Oh, NFL Films. I remember it.
All right. I'm going to go with for those reasons, I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions also. I think they'll get back on track and really, I like the season the Lions are having this year. Like I said, Coach Schwartz, he got that goatee going, and there's a new attitude that's floating around that locker room there in Detroit. So I like the Detroit Lions in this game as well.
All right, Charles, you're not going to make up any ground on me. You're either going to be 2-0 or 0-2 right here.
Well, we'll go to the Miami Dolphins again when we talk heartbreaking. Miami Dolphins at New England this week. Heartbreak on there as well. But the Dolphins started off 3-0, gone 0-3 in the last 3 games, so that equates to 3-3 for those of you who do not have a calculator. Dolphins looking to get back on track going into New England, but historically a tough game. I'm going to go ahead and say this. I think that New England's playing well. Dolphins, I don't think they're going to win. They're going to lose 3-4 straight games here, so I'm going to go with the Dolphins. I like Tannehill, even though he's made some mistakes at key moments, but I don't see Tannehill really getting rattled. It's just, making a few errors here. So I think he'll be okay in this game. I like the Dolphins to get back in the win column here. Narrow margins, I'm going to go with the Dolphins over New England.
I actually like your logic. However, I'm going to apply it to the other side of the ball. I don't think that Tom Brady will have as poor a performance as he did against the Jets, overthrowing receivers. Gronk looked a little rusty. I mean, he had one catch open field and tripped over himself. I think he'll improve much and gives Brady a needed weapon again this week.
Yep.
And I ultimately don't think a Bill Belichick coached team is going to have another letdown against a team like the Dolphins. No offense to your Dolphins, but they're clearly on the downswing, inopportune turnovers, and not even winning at home. So I don't see them going into Foxborough and pulling it out. I'm going with the Patriots.
All right, and the Dolphins did pick up to bolster that offensive line. They did pick up left tackle Bryant McKinney from the Baltimore Ravens. So hopefully that makes a difference here. But then again, you got to think there's a reason why the Ravens would let McKinney go. So that's the other side of that coin.
Yeah, he has issues with parties and wine bottles, I believe.
Okay, so one of the teams we talked about before, the Steelers, Pittsburgh Steelers, have gotten off to a slow start, but now they've got a 2-game win streak going. Pittsburgh going into Oakland to play the Raiders. This is a good old-school rivalry going all the way back to the 70s, back to the days of Jack Tatum and George Atkinson. And here we come, modern day. The Steelers looking to get on track, and the Oakland Raiders, I don't know exactly what type of team they have there, but in any case, I'm going with the Steelers here to get on a roll. They've got the championship pedigree. Steelers on a roll, going to Oakland, roll over the Raiders, and get themselves back to the fringes of the playoff race.
I agree, and I know last year the Steelers lost the game in Oakland. They probably should have won, but in watching some of the game on Sunday against the Ravens, two things that stood out to me were their defense, which has really been playing well lately, and Le'Veon Bell, who it looked like may end up being the answer at running back. He ran the ball when he needed to. He looked a lot better than Isaac Redman, which is why he's out of work now. And I think it takes ultimately pressure off of Roethlisberger to try and force the ball and make plays he doesn't need to. So I think they go in, they've got some momentum going, they've strung together 2 wins, trying to get back into the playoff race. And I don't like, as much as Terrell Pryor's impressed me this season, I don't like that matchup against the Steelers defense with Mr. Palomalu playing in his early career form again.
Yeah, that's true. So we're both going to agree on Pittsburgh. And then let's take a surprise team here. The New York Jets in Cincinnati to play the Bengals. The Jets, we had all looked at this as a season where everything was going to just implode. Rex Ryan was going to be gone. Mark Sanchez was going to be gone. Of course, Sanchez is out for the season. But the Jets at 4-3, right in the thick of the playoff hunt. And then the Cincinnati Bengals, who are leading the AFC North. So big matchup there. The Jets were lucky to win this past week, and then Cincinnati got the last second win. But I'm going to go with home field advantage here, and I like Cincinnati. I like Dalton and A.J. Green against that defensive secondary of the New York Jets. I think they'll get it done this week. I'm going to go with the Cincinnati Bengals.
I agree with you. They had an impressive win on the road. I think they'll be happy to be home. Dalton's been playing a lot better. I like the Bengals' defense. I think they'll frustrate Geno Smith and force him into his inevitable turnovers or interceptions. And I just ultimately, if you're going to put Antonio Cromartie on A.J. Green, I like Green in that matchup overwhelmingly. And I think the Bengals keep their streak going.
Yep, and then don't forget Giovanni Bernard there at running back, too.
Yeah, and that's been another asset to Dalton, too. He hasn't had to throw as much. Have a legitimate ground threat there behind you has definitely helped him this year. He's really, for those of us who watched Hard Knocks, we thought he looked good, and he's really materialized here in the season.
Okay, and then the last game we'll pick the Atlanta Falcons in Arizona to take on the Cardinals. Of course, the Falcons with all kinds of problems. Steven Jackson, I guess, is almost close to coming back. In fact, from what I think he's going to play a little bit in this game. Roddy White is not going to play, I understand, and Julio Jones, of course, done for the season. Tony Gonzalez is still there, but Atlanta, they got to get back in the win column, or they really got to circle the wagons here at some point, or they're going to be completely out of the playoff picture without hope. And Arizona, going along being Arizona. Fitzgerald a little bit injured. Carson Palmer slinging the ball. How do you see this one?
Yeah, this is a tough one to pick because you've got two teams that I can't figure out heads or tails, and
right.
Injuries have definitely not helped either side. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'll pick the Cardinals. This is a game the Falcons should win and easily could win. but for whatever reason, traveling out to the desert and the Cardinals having an extra few days off, I could see this being kind of a struggle on both sides of the ball. Cardinals defense is underrated, and with Matt Ryan not having the aerial weapons he's used to, I'll go for the upset, and I'll pick the Cardinals here just to be a contrarian.
A contrarian. I thought you were from New York.
Oh, that too.
Anyways, okay. All right. Well, that I'm tempted to go your way and go with the Cardinals too, but I think the Cardinals are 3-4. The Falcons at 2-4. The Falcons cannot lose this game. I don't care what they have to do. They have to win this game. So based on the desperation factor involved, I think the Falcons find a way to win this game, and they come out with a victory against the Arizona Cardinals. And I'm going to be, and in fact, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in Arizona. I'm going to see the Cardinals play against the Houston Texans. So, I get to witness that Cardinals defense firsthand there.
Are you suddenly now a big follower of the Houston Texans, or are you just looking to go on a road trip?
Go on a road trip, and I love that stadium where the Cardinals play. Anyone if you ever watch football games or travel to football games, one of the stadiums you must see a game in is that stadium there in Arizona. It is absolutely magnificent. You've been there, Lardieri. Back me up on this. I
have. 2 years ago, I was there when the Giants played, and I didn't even know you were there until you posted the pictures on Facebook after the fact. But I've been to a number of stadiums. I have been to, I don't even remember what it's called now, but it used to be Quest in Seattle. I think it's, CenturyLink or something technical like that. That's a cool stadium. I thought that was really neat, and Arizona eclipsed it. From the outside, it looks like either a spaceship or a toaster oven, but inside it's beautiful. Really liked it a lot, and I'm trying to find an excuse to get back there myself, so I can't blame you for spending money on the lowly Texans. It's worth going to see that stadium again.
Hey, go to StubHub, man. You can get tickets for under $40 a piece.
All right, you're tempting me. Maybe I will when the kids' sports ends. Because you know what, though, if I bribe the kids with the fact that there's a Cracker Barrel right across the street from that complex, they might be in.
Okay, all righty. So that's the picks of the week. So we're just about ready to wrap things up. Mr. Lardieri, any final words for everyone out there?
Yeah, kind of sobering, going back to the Bum Phillips and Bud Adams mention. Family member, my wife's uncle Hector, passed away last week. He was a diehard Cowboys fan, and you know how much I love Cowboys fans, Charles, but he was a good one. He was a great guy, loyal fan. Last year he actually got to see the new stadium in Dallas against the Giants. Unfortunately, the Giants won for him at least. And then got to see them in San Diego this year, too. And unfortunately, there the Chargers won. But great guy, and like I said, if you're a Cowboys fan and I like you, you must be a great guy. So just wanted to mention that. And then, continuing back to our recurring theme about injuries, something I've just been pontificating over recently, and with a lot of what's going on in the news. Charles, can we blame all these injuries on Obamacare, or at least on the fact that this website to sign up for medical insurance isn't working? Can that be correlated to the rise in injuries in the NFL? I'm just wondering. I mean, we blame everything else on everything nowadays. There's lots of scapegoating. Why not NFL injuries? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think it works. There must be a conspiracy theory in there somewhere. I'll work it out, and then we get back to that next week.
Yeah, please do, because you know what? We can't global warming anymore for some reason. It's become passé. I don't know if it's because we had a mild summer in this country, but let's pick Obamacare. Why not? If not, we'll find something else. I don't know, maybe Voice American Idol. I'm not quite sure, but there's got to be something for these injuries. We can't blame it on AstroTurf anymore. They've got the new field turf, and a lot of other stadiums have grass. So we've got to get to the bottom of this and go to Area 51 and figure it out.
And the government opened up again, right? They're operational again. Right? I think.
Yeah, my over 2.5 days won. So yeah.
Okay. All right. There we go. Okay, everybody. Hey, thanks for watching. This is, again, Football Talk, which is an Inside Sports production. You can follow me on Twitter at The Inside Sports. Follow Chris Lardieri on Twitter at Chris L Sports, or his writings, chrislsports.blogspot.com. So until next week, this is Charles E. Smith Jr. for Chris Lardieri. This is Football Talk, We'll see everybody next week. Thanks for joining us.